First Edition is a ministry of First Community Church, a place of worship for everyone, regardless of religious background. Join us to enhance your spiritual journey and share in God's love and grace. And now, First Edition.
Good morning, and welcome to First Edition, the television ministry of First Community Church. My name is Glenn Miles. I'm the senior minister here in this amazing congregation, and we're thrilled that you've joined us on this day for worship. We want you to know that in this church, you are welcomed and accepted here as you are. No matter who you are, where you're from, what you believe or don't believe, you are welcomed and accepted here in this place. We would be thrilled to see you sometime for worship on a Sunday morning. Our sermon today is going to be delivered by Reverend Sarah Keents, our minister to youth and Camp Akita. It's titled, The Least of These. It's based on Jesus' parable of the sheep and the goats. And as you can imagine, the least of these who are cared for or ignored. It's a beautiful sermon, thoughtfully delivered, and inspiring all at the same time. I know you're going to enjoy hearing her preach. Let's worship together.
All right, last week I was walking my dogs at the park. I live right by Fancyburg Park, and I was walking I have two dogs, many of you know. I have 2 dogs. They're both Labradors. They're named Otter and Fox. And as we were walking in the park, we came upon a stick. But it wasn't just any old stick. This stick was enormous. It was more like a full tree branch. And my younger dog, Fox, when she saw it, her eyes got wide, and I knew that our walk was about to change. Because when Fox encounters a big branch like this, she must carry it. And she's no longer interested in strolling casually through the neighborhood. She's got to get this thing back home immediately. I've tried to stop her from doing this because truly it ruins our walks. And I'm able to get her to drop the branch, and I've told her, because I know she understands English, I've told her, you don't need to carry that. But she won't leave it behind. And she tells me, with her body language, I have to carry this. Retrieving is who I am. This is what I was made for. And so we added this particular log to the pile with all the other logs and branches and sticks that Fox has found in the neighborhood. And if you walked past my house and you saw this pile of all the sticks and branches that Fox has brought home, you would think, what does Sarah know that I do not know? Is she building an ark? So last week when this happened, I thought about this idea of storing up wood. And it reminded me of a Sunday school lesson that I had when I was a kid, when I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And I'm going to preface this by reminding you that I grew up going to a different church as a young child. This did not happen at First Community. At this church that I attended as a child, there was a lesson about doing good works during your lifetime so that you can benefit from those good works in the afterlife. In this lesson, the Sunday school teacher taught us that every time that you do something good for others, you are sending planks of wood to heaven. And somewhere in heaven, someone is using those planks of wood to build you a house. Maybe it's God, maybe it's angels. They didn't tell us who the contractors were on this project. But the more good works that you do, the bigger and better your house in heaven will be. And I remember the Sunday school teacher saying something to the effect of, don't you want to live in a mansion in heaven? Just donate your old clothes. I'm going to pause to remind you that this lesson has no biblical basis. Yes, there are Bible verses about storing up treasures in heaven. There are Bible verses about God's house in heaven having many rooms. But there is not a story about you do good works, you get a mansion in heaven. But I didn't know that as a 10-year-old. What I did know was that I had a lot of questions, and they were all construction related. Even as a 10-year-old, I knew that it takes more than wood planks to make a house. What actions allow me to get drywall? Where does the stone for the chimney come from? What kind of works are those? So even though I left this lesson totally confused, I was also very motivated by it. Because of this lesson, my 10-year-old self believed that everything that I did was sending literal brick and mortar to a literal house somewhere in the clouds. So for example, I would be on the playground and a basketball would roll towards me and I would toss it back to the kids that had been playing with it. And as I threw the ball, I would think to myself, there's a 2x4. And it would feel really good. And so I would seek out ways to be kind. So the house in heaven lesson did lead me to believe that my small actions really mattered. But as you might guess, this lesson also inspired a great deal of fear and anxiety in me. First of all, every time that I didn't do something to serve others, I felt bad. Not for not serving them, but for the wasted potential building supplies that interaction may have provided. But my biggest fear was, and you can probably guess, my biggest fear was, what if I die, like, soon? There's no way that I have earned enough supplies and materials as a 10-year-old. And so I imagined myself in the afterlife, shivering inside a cold shack because I didn't donate enough canned foods to the food drive. I want you to know that we're not doing lessons like this here at First Community Church. It is not our intention in Sunday school here to inspire existential fear in your children. We do not want them to have to unlearn the type of harmful theology that so many of us grew up with, theology that guilted us into doing things and that taught us that the most important thing was getting into heaven. Instead, we study real stories from the actual Bible. And the New Testament stories that we study include stories about Jesus helping people who are sick or injured, stories about Jesus including people that others feared or disliked, stories about Jesus looking past labels and seeing real people with real feelings, stories about Jesus sending the most unqualified, imperfect people to teach and preach his message of hope. In our Sunday school, we do talk about how your small 10-year-old actions matter. We do talk about serving others and serving God. But we talk about doing it for the real people who are shivering inside a cold shack here on earth right now. And we talk about how we, even as young and unqualified and imperfect as we are, we can be God's hands and feet for them. But then we come to the end of the Gospel of Matthew and we get today's story. It's a story where Jesus is king, Jesus is judging people, Jesus is separating people into groups, and Jesus is telling us that we have to do specific things to inherit the kingdom of God. And now I'm confused, because today's text sounds a lot like heavenly 2x4's theology. So what is going on here? Let's look at a little bit of context. We're in the Gospel of Matthew, and Jesus has just finished teaching a bunch of stories, and they include a lot of metaphors and similes. He says things like, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. The kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the sea. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman uses for baking. He uses all these different ways of describing God's dream for the world and our role within it. And then Jesus gets to his final lesson, our reading today. And he says that at the end of days, Jesus will return, and he will organize people the way a shepherd separates sheep from goats. And the sheep are the righteous ones. And Jesus will say to them, you will inherit the kingdom, because I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothes. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison and you visited me. And the sheep people will be stunned. They will ask, when did we do those things? We have no memory of doing any of that. And Jesus will say, when you did it for the least of these siblings of mine, you did it for me. A much more fruitful Sunday school lesson for my 10-year-old self would have been to read this actual story from the actual Bible, because there's lessons here that would have been far more helpful than heavenly 2x4s. First, Jesus answers a question that people have been wondering about and that people still wonder about. What are we supposed to do to get close to God and be specific? Here, Jesus delivers specific answers. Provide food, water, and clothing to those who don't have it, welcome the stranger, care for the sick, and visit the prisoner. That's it. Remember, Jesus doesn't start this teaching with the kingdom of heaven is like. He's not using metaphors and similes here. He isn't talking about clothing one another in kindness or feeding one another the gospel. This story is a call to put literal food on the plate of those who do not have enough to eat. That isn't meant to be intimidating. It's meant to be good news, because these are simple tasks. Jesus isn't asking everyone to donate a vast sum of money or achieve great fame in order to get close to God. We simply need to give in ways everyone of every age, of every income level is able to do. And yet, this help needs to be uncalculated. It needs to be the opposite of the heavenly 2x4's lesson. There's no need to log every action and try to add up your return on investment. In this story, the sheep helped because they saw a need and they acted upon it. They couldn't stop themselves. It was natural and instinctive to them. They didn't think that they were going to get anything in return. On the other hand, those seated on the other side, the goats, Jesus calls them, they say to Jesus, after the reading that we read today, they say to Jesus, well, if we had known that it was you, we gladly would have helped all of those people, but we thought that those were folks that don't matter. Unlike my childhood Sunday school, I don't think this story is meant to scare us. I don't think it's meant to leave us fearful that we are a goat. I do think this story is an opportunity for us to examine the times when we had all the opportunity, all the resources, all the ability to help, and we chose not to. In bringing up the goats, I think Jesus is urging us, please take a look at your actions, not so you can go to heaven, but because ignoring people just isn't who you are. One thing that I learned while preparing this sermon was about sheep and goats. Do you know why shepherds separate sheep and goats? I didn't know this. It's because sheep have thick enough coats to sleep outside, but goats need to be inside for more warmth and protection. So shepherds separate sheep and goats at night and then reunite them in the morning. What I take this to mean is that even when we are being goat-like, we are still being taken in, we are still cared for and cared about, and we are still given the opportunity to rejoin the flock. At the end of today's reading, Jesus says the phrase that we're so familiar with, when you did it for the least of these siblings of mine, you did it for me. Jesus is being smart here with that use of the word least. He's being clever because he knows that no matter who is listening, there is always someone least or less than, whether it's in size or rank, importance or income, power or resources. There is always someone who has less. For us, for those of us who are sitting here at First Community Church, may we remember that we are big. Many of us have many resources. All of us have some resources. No matter what we have or how we compare to each other, we are all called to serve our siblings, our fellow children of God, who have needs greater than our own. All right, have you guys started decorating for Christmas yet? Yeah? Some are saying, no, I'm waiting for later today when I have the whole rest of the day to do it. All right, as you are preparing for Christmas and decorating your house and planning all of your Christmas movies that you're going to watch this season, I have a Christmas movie for you to add to your list. It's not a Christmas movie, but it has Christmas feelings. It's the 2019 version of Little Women, directed by Greta Gerwig. It's the 7th film adaptation of Louisa May Alcott's 1868 novel. I watched the 2019 version. I watched it on a plane coming home from California a couple months ago. And there, sitting on the plane by myself, watching Little Women, I began to openly weep. Not at the end of the movie, at the beginning of the movie. I'm going to tell you about the scene that really got me. All right, so as you know, Little Women is about 4 sisters living in Massachusetts with their mother while their father is fighting in the Civil War. In this particular scene, it's Christmas morning, and the sisters are waiting for their mother to return from visiting a neighbor. And as they wait, the girls talk about how they wish their family wasn't so poor. If they weren't so poor, there would be presents under the Christmas tree, and they would have sparkly dresses like all the other girls. And as they're talking about this, their mother comes home, and they sit at the breakfast table, and they say, finally, we get to eat our big Christmas breakfast. We're starving. Let's eat. But their mother tells them that she has been visiting a neighbor, Mrs. Hummel, and Mrs. Hummel truly has nothing. She and her 5 children are all sharing one bed, and they have nothing to eat. My girls, their mother, played by Laura Dern, says, will you give them your breakfast as a Christmas present? And all 4 girls look completely crestfallen. They are all so disappointed. But then the next scene is the 4 sisters carrying baskets of food and blankets through the snow. They arrive at Mrs. Hummel's cabin, and they hold her baby, and they wrap her toddlers in sweaters and blankets, and they give them all their food. And then they return to their own humble farmhouse. And they walk inside, and what do they find? Their breakfast table is overflowing with food. A whole ham, multiple cakes, savory pies, plates of pink cookies piled up in towers. Is it fairies? One of the girls asks. No, it was Mr. Lawrence, the rich neighbor, who saw the girls walking with their baskets through the snow. That moment when the door opens and the music swells and you see the breakfast table full of food, when the girls gasp and their eyes fill with surprise, that's when I cried on the airplane. Because the little women didn't give their food away because they thought someone was watching. They didn't give it away to get something better in return. They didn't even give it away because they wanted to. They gave it away because they couldn't eat it, knowing that there was a family who had nothing at all. They gave it away with the full confidence that they would come home to an empty table. And in that giving, they received something entirely unexpected. We act on behalf of one another because we have to. Like my dog, who cannot leave the stick on the ground, we too have a built-in sense of what we cannot leave behind. We have to feed each other. We have to clothe each other. We have to care for each other. So may we put ourselves in places where we are able to see that kind of need, because when we see it, we will act upon it. That is when we will be delighted and surprised to find ourselves feeling closer than ever to God. May we do the most we can for the least of these. Amen.